So I want to talk today about a part of tarot reading that I don't think gets enough consideration, and that is the question. Now obviously, of course, sometimes when we read tarot we don't have a question, and that's absolutely valid as well. I often do a 3-card reading and I might ask, what do I or my client most need to know right now? I might ask, what does the tarot want to say to me at this point? I might ask something like, how should I best use this day, this week, this month, this opportunity? So we don't always have a really specific question, and that's fine. But often we might have a really clear question. I remember reading for a client some time ago. It was he was in a temporary part-time job. He was looking to get back into his career role again, and he'd applied for a job. He had an interview coming up, and he wanted to know basically, will I get this job? So I did my classic 9-card spread. I did where are you now, which could be considered, are you the right person for the job? Do you have the skills, the aptitude? Are you going to interview well? Is getting this job possible? I then did advice, which is, how to be in the interview, how to, do you need to be aware of bringing anything or fact checking the company that you are going to the interview for, how to handle the interview, and then of course I did most likely outcome. And this reading is forever stuck in my mind because 8 of the 9 cards were incredibly positive. I can remember we had both the 3 and the 8 of Pentacles, the 2 sort of work cards, if you like. I know that we had the Ace of Pentacles. I seem to think the 2 of Cups was there, which is often building a bond in the interview. I'm pretty sure that the 6 of Wands was one of the outcome cards, which is a success card and recognition for your skills. But this card here, like I say, this is many years ago and it's always stuck with me, was the Tower. And I remember looking at it and thinking, that Tower doesn't fit in with anything. And the Tower can be unexpected. And what I said to him was, I think you will get offered the job, but I think something is going to unexpectedly disrupt the process. And what actually happened was, the temporary part-time job he was doing, they offered him a full-time job with a promotion. And of course, the point of this is that very often the initial question we're reading for just opens up more questions, which is one of the reasons, if you book a professional reading with me, I do not charge for the cards. I charge for my time, because quite often, and I remember reading that spread really quickly, and it just being so on point, so positive, until we got to that Tower, and then it was like there is an unexpected change to the process. And of course we read for the unexpected change for the process, and then we realised that he was going to have a choice. At that point the cards we didn't have the time to explore that it was his existing job, but we definitely got to the point of exploring that he would have a choice. Because I can remember that for the Tower, when I read the clarity cards for the Tower, the 2 of Pentacles was one of the cards that we got, which is often choice. And so I want you to realise that the question you think you're asking is often not the definitive question you need to know. Very often, let's take somebody that isn't sure whether, staying with the job theme, do I stay in my existing job and hope that I'm going to get a promotion, or is now a good time to look for another job? Now, if I was doing, if I had a client that came to me with that question, I would normally do an either or spreads. So I might start with your existing job, and I might say, let's look at the situation for your existing job. Let's ask advice and what you need to know. And then let's look at the short-term outcome and the long-term outcome. And then I might replicate that identically with, and what if you look for another job? What would looking for another job be like? What is the advice? How will you feel in 3 to 6 months? How will you feel in 2 to 3 years? And then you can literally map it out and compare. Very often in a situation like this, we get what I call a Druid's choice, which is both outcomes are fairly similar, and that is surprisingly common. Or we can get the polar opposite, where both outcomes are bad. And what that means is you're not asking the right question. Now, if you're a client and you're coming to me, it is my job to listen to what you need to know and to rephrase the question in a way that I can read for it. And I definitely feel I experience reading tarot as being like a conversation. And I ask the card something and I get information back. And sometimes I read really quickly because the cards are telling me or confirming what I already know. And sometimes the cards come back muddled, unclear, confused. That means that what you're asking the cards can't be answered by them. That would be like taking you to a pizza restaurant that only sold pizzas and asking, do you want pasta or fish and chips? It's like, huh? It doesn't work. So watch out if you are asking a question of your cards, and if it's a choice, if both outcomes are very similar, or if both outcomes are really bad, good or bad, then you need to rephrase the question. And in that case, I might ask something like, what do I need to know? Or how do I make this choice? If you've done a spread and the cards are muddled, they're still trying to communicate to you, but the question and sometimes the spread that you are using aren't allowing the cards to express what you need to know. If that's happening, the simplest thing to do is just stop, put the cards back together, reshuffle, and ask, what do I need to know about this situation? You might ask, what could be my main focus right now? The spreads that don't, or the clients that don't work with me with tarot, are clients that are totally fixated on an outcome and don't want to appreciate that maybe that outcome isn't achievable, maybe that outcome isn't good for them, maybe that outcome is impacting other people and they actually don't want that outcome, they just don't want to admit it. So a huge part, if you're a professional reader or if you're reading for yourself, is to really tune into the cards. Are they on point? Are they streamlined? Am I able to read this with ease? In which case, congratulations, the question is fitting the situation and the cards are communicating clearly. Or is it really hard to read? The cards are muddled, they're all over the place, you just can't get a grip of it. Just stop, put the cards back and rethink your question. I really learnt this the hard way, and I'm glad that my client had an amazing sense of humour. It was quite some years ago now. It was an older lady, and she came to me for a reading, and she said, in her exact words, will I ever move from this house? She had moved to be close to family, and she was feeling very isolated, and though she was glad to be near her family, they didn't really have the time to replace the community that she left. Now, her exact question was, will I ever move from this house? And as I did realise she had a good sense of humour, my answer was, I'm not going to read for that. Of course you'll move from this house. What we need to know is, will it be in a box? Or is now a good time to choose to move? And we rephrased the question. And what we looked at is, should she stay where she is? And we did the choice spread, so we did short and long term. We did, should she aim to move back to her, away from her family and to her original community and friendship circle that she was missing? Or should she choose to move but stay close to her family, but perhaps there was a better option for where she should live? And so we adjusted the original question of, should I stay or should I go, to give it more clear structure. And again, I can remember this spread because it was so fascinating. All of the short-term options were about pause, wait, stay. We had cards like the 9 of Wands, the 2 of Swords, the 4 of Swords. And then in fact what the card said was, when she was ready, she should move still close to her family, and the final card was the 3 of Cups. And what I advised her to do was, don't make a real jump at this point. Pause, get to know where you're living, make some friends, and then move so that you can live closer to new friends, new community. And so I took the very sort of blunt, will I ever move from this house? And I talked to her a little bit about, why does she want to move and what actual choices does she have? And then when we read for the different choices, and then when we read for short and long term, it made it much easier. So be really, really careful about how you phrase the question. I think writing the question down is really helpful. If I'm seeing a client in person, I always mind map. I might listen to their situation, write some keywords, and then phrase the question and the spread around the keywords. And remember, if you've written your question down and you've done your spread and it's just not very cohesive or comprehensive, go back to your question. Are you asking the cards something that they can't easily answer? Is the problem not that you can't read the cards, but that you haven't asked the right question?